The smell of garlic and ginger filled the small galley of the bright horizon. Taesung stood at the stove, stirring a large pot of soup with steady hands. Steam rose around his face as he tasted the broth, then added a pinch more salt. Outside the small window, stars streaked past in lines of white light. The ship was traveling through deep space, far from any planet or station. Taesung had been the ship's cook for 8 months now. Every day was the same. Wake at 600 hours, prepare breakfast, clean the galley, prepare lunch, tend the small garden where he grew fresh vegetables, prepare dinner, clean again, sleep, repeat. He liked the routine. He liked the quiet. Most of all, he liked being alone. The crew of the Bright Horizon was small. Only 12 people lived on the massive cargo ship. Captain Hyun-woo was a tired man in his 50s who talked about retirement constantly. First Officer Dayun ran the ship with strict rules and cold efficiency. Engineer Bora spent her days covered in grease, keeping the old engines running. Navigator Jin-ho was young and cheerful, always smiling despite the boring work. Medical Officer Soo-bin rarely left her small medical bay except to eat. The others were cargo handlers and technicians. They played cards in the recreation room and complained about the long journey between stations. Taesung knew their names but little else. He served them food 3 times a day, accepted their brief thanks, and returned to his galley. They thought he was shy. They thought he was boring. That was fine with him. The truth was that Taesung preferred it this way. People asked questions when you got close to them. They wanted to know about your past, your family, your dreams. Taesung had no good answers for those questions. His past was something he wanted to forget. So he stayed in his galley, cooked his meals, and kept his distance. He was chopping vegetables for the evening meal when the intercom crackled to life. "All crew to stations," Captain Hyun-woo's voice said. There was something strange in his tone. Something tight. "We have company." Taesung set down his knife and wiped his hands on his apron. Company out here in deep space usually meant trouble. The Bright Horizon traveled through the outer rim, far from the protection of military patrols. Pirates and raiders knew these routes well. He walked to the small monitor mounted on the galley wall and switched it to the bridge feed. Captain Hyun-woo sat in his command chair, staring at the main screen. First Officer Da-eun stood beside him, her face pale. Navigator Jin-ho's hands moved frantically across his console. 3 ships, Da-eun said quietly, moving fast. "Military-grade engines, and can we outrun them?" Hyun-woo asked. Jin-ho shook his head. "Not a chance, sir. They're twice as fast as us." Taesung watched the screen as 3 dark shapes appeared in the distance. They were sleek and dangerous-looking, built for speed and violence. The Bright Horizon was just a cargo hauler, slow and defenseless. It carried industrial equipment and supplies, nothing worth killing for. But raiders didn't always care about the cargo. Sometimes they just wanted the ship itself. Sometimes they killed everyone aboard to leave no witnesses. "Open a channel," Hyun-woo ordered. "Maybe we can talk our way out of this." Da-eun pressed a button. Static filled the bridge for a moment, then a harsh voice spoke. "Cargo ship Bright Horizon, cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist and you die. Run and you die. You have 60 seconds to comply." The channel went dead. Captain Hyun-woo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Taesung saw the defeat on the man's face. There was no military nearby to call for help. No station close enough to reach. They were alone out here, and the raiders knew it. "Cut the engines," Hyun-woo said quietly. "Tell everyone to stay calm and cooperate. Maybe they'll just take what they want and leave." Da-eun's voice came over the ship-wide intercom, ordering all crew to remain calm and avoid resistance. Taesung heard footsteps in the corridor outside his galley as crew members hurried to the cargo bay, where they'd been told to gather. He stood by his stove, watching the monitor as the 3 raider ships drew closer. The ships attached to the Bright Horizon with loud metallic clangs that echoed through the hull. Taesung could hear the hiss of airlocks being forced open. Then came the sound of boots, many boots, stomping through the corridors. Shouting voices in different languages, some human and some alien. The raiders were inside. On the monitor, Taesung watched as the crew was forced into the cargo bay at gunpoint. There were about 20 raiders, maybe more. They wore mismatched armor and carried heavy weapons. Some were human. Others were aliens he didn't recognize, scaled and clawed and dangerous-looking. Their leader was a massive reptilian creature, easily 7 feet tall with red markings across his face. "Down on your knees," the leader roared. His voice was like grinding rocks. All of you. Hands behind your heads. The crew obeyed. Captain Hyunwoo knelt slowly, his old knees shaking. Dayun knelt beside him, her jaw clenched tight. Bora was already on the ground, blood trickling from her lip where a raider had hit her. Young Jinho looked terrified, tears running down his face. Taesung turned off the monitor. The galley was silent except for the bubbling of soup on the stove. He stood there for a long moment, hands resting on the counter. His face showed no emotion. Then he reached under the counter and pressed a hidden panel. It clicked open. Inside the secret compartment were 2 combat knives, their blades dark and perfectly maintained. Taesung looked at them like he was looking at old friends he'd hoped never to see again. He'd hidden them there on his first day aboard the ship, just in case. Just in case the past came looking for him. Just in case he needed to be that person again. He heard boots approaching the galley. Heavy steps, careless and confident. A raider was coming. Taesung closed the panel and stood by the stove. His body relaxed and his hands visible. He made himself look small, frightened, harmless. Just a cook. Nothing to worry about. The door slid open. A large human raider stepped inside, his plasma rifle raised. He was covered in scars and wore pieces of stolen military armor. His eyes swept the galley looking for valuables. Then he saw Taesung standing by the stove. Well, the raider said with a cruel smile. Looks like we missed one. What's wrong, cook? Scared to join your friends? Taesung didn't answer. He just stood there watching the raider with dark, calm eyes. The raider laughed and stepped closer. Nothing to say? That's fine. Dead men don't need to talk anyway. He raised his rifle, pointing it at Taesung's chest. What happened next took 3 seconds. Taesung moved. His body became a blur of motion, faster than the raider could react. The rifle clattered to the floor. The raider made a choking sound and staggered backward. He looked down at the knife buried in his throat, confusion filling his eyes. Then he fell. Taesung stood over the body, breathing steadily. His hands weren't shaking. His face showed no fear, no anger, no regret. Just cold, empty focus. He pulled the knife free and cleaned it on the raider's jacket. Then he picked up the fallen rifle and checked its charge. Still full. The quiet cook was gone. Someone else stood in the galley now. Someone dangerous. Someone who had done this before many times. Taesung walked to the door and looked out into the corridor. Empty. He could hear voices and movement deeper in the ship. 20 raiders. 12 crew members being held hostage. The situation was clear. He'd wanted peace. He'd wanted to be just a cook. But they'd brought violence to his ship. They'd hurt his crew, and now they would learn what happens when you corner a predator pretending to be prey. Taesung disappeared into the shadows of the maintenance corridor, moving silent as death. The maintenance corridor was dark and narrow. Taesung moved through it without making a sound. He knew these passages well. During his 8 months on the ship, he'd explored every corner during the quiet hours when the crew slept. He'd told himself it was just curiosity, just something to pass the time. But deep down he'd been mapping the ship. Old habits from his previous life were hard to break. He pressed himself against the wall and listened. 2 raiders were talking in the corridor ahead, their voices casual and relaxed. They thought they'd already won. They thought the crew was helpless. That mistake would cost them. Taesung moved to a junction where the maintenance shaft opened above the main corridor. Through the grating he could see the 2 raiders below. One was human. The other was a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. They were joking about how easy this job had been, already dividing up their share of the loot. The cook reached up and carefully loosened the grating. It came free without a sound. He set it aside and lowered himself through the opening. His boots touched the floor behind the raiders without making a whisper of noise. The human raider died first before he even knew someone was there. The alien turned, all 4 arms reaching for weapons, but Taesung was faster. The knife found its mark twice. Both bodies fell. Taesung dragged them into a storage room and sealed the door. He took their weapons and ammunition. 2 down. 18 to go. In the cargo bay, the crew knelt on the cold metal floor. Guards stood around them with weapons ready. The reptilian leader, whose name was Krevix, walked among the prisoners like a king surveying conquered subjects. Search everything, Krevix ordered his raiders. Take anything valuable. Food, medicine, equipment. This ship will make us rich. He stopped in front of Captain Hyunwoo. And you, old man. You're going to tell us where you keep the good stuff, the real valuables. Hyunwoo looked up at him with tired eyes. We're just a cargo hauler. We carry industrial supplies. Nothing valuable. Krevix's massive hand shot out and grabbed the captain by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Don't lie to me. Every ship has secrets. Every captain has a hidden safe. He threw Hyunwoo back to the floor. Search his quarters. Tear it apart if you have to. Bo-Ra, the engineer, couldn't stay quiet. Leave him alone. We told you there's nothing here worth. The raider closest to her struck her across the face with the butt of his rifle. Bo-Ra fell to the side, blood pouring from her nose. Su-Bin, the medical officer, reached out to help her, but a guard kicked her back. Anyone else want to be brave? Krevix asked, his voice full of dark amusement. The crew stayed silent. Daeun's hands clenched behind her head, but she said nothing. Jinho was crying quietly. The others stared at the floor, too scared to move. Krevix activated his communicator. Vex, report. Have you searched the upper decks yet? Silence. He frowned and tried again. Vex, answer me. Still nothing. Probably stealing something for himself, Krevix muttered. Roth, go find that idiot and bring him back here. A large human raider nodded and left the cargo bay. Krevix turned back to the prisoners. The rest of you start loading our ships, move. Several raiders herded the crew to their feet and forced them to start carrying cargo crates toward the airlocks. The work was slow and exhausting. The crates were heavy and the raiders were impatient, shouting and hitting anyone who moved too slowly. Meanwhile, Taesung had reached the engine room. 2 raiders were there, trying to figure out how to access the ship's fuel reserves. They wanted to drain the Bright Horizons tanks to refuel their own ships. Bo-Ra had designed the system with multiple security locks specifically to prevent theft. The raiders were getting frustrated. This is taking too long, one of them complained. Just blast it open and blow us all up? The other replied. Use your brain. We need to find the override codes. They never found them. Taesung emerged from behind a coolant tank like a shadow. The raiders died without raising an alarm. The cook checked their communication devices. No messages sent. Good. He damaged the fuel access panel to make it look like a malfunction and moved on. The raider named Roth walked through the ship's corridors, calling for Vex. Where are you, you lazy piece of garbage? He checked the storage room and found the 2 bodies Taesung had hidden there. Roth's eyes went wide. He grabbed his communicator. Boss, we got a problem. Vex and Corral are dead. He never finished the sentence. The lights in the corridor went out, plunging everything into darkness. Roth spun around, his rifle light cutting through the black. He saw nothing. Then he felt cold metal against his throat and the world went away. Taesung let the body fall and moved quickly. The alarm would come soon. He'd been discovered. He needed to work faster. In the cargo bay, Krevix's communicator crackled and died mid-transmission. The reptilian leader stared at it, his expression darkening. What was that? Roth? No answer. He looked at his remaining raiders. Vex isn't responding. Corral isn't responding. Now, Roth, something's wrong. Maybe their comms are broken, one raider suggested nervously. All 3 at the same time. Krevix growled. He pointed at 4 of his raiders. You 4, go check the engine room and find out what's happening. Stay together and stay alert. The 4 raiders left the cargo bay, their weapons ready. They moved as a group, checking every corner and shadow. They found the engine room and the 2 dead bodies there. One of them immediately called Krevix. Boss, 2 more dead. This wasn't an accident. Someone's hunting us. Lock down the ship, Krevix ordered. Close all the blast doors. Seal every section. Find whoever's doing this and kill them. The raiders scrambled to follow orders. Throughout the ship, heavy blast doors began to close, sealing off different sections. But Taesung was already ahead of them. He'd anticipated this move. He was in the ship's control junction, a small maintenance room that housed the environmental controls and security systems. His fingers moved across the console with practiced speed. He'd studied this system for months. He knew every command, every override. The blast doors sealed as ordered, but not in the pattern the raiders expected. Instead of protecting them, the doors trapped them. Raiders who had been together were suddenly isolated in different sections. Those in corridors found themselves sealed away from their groups, and then the lights began to fail. Section by section, the ship went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in dim red light that made shadows dance and move. In the cargo bay, the crew watched as their guards became increasingly nervous. The raiders argued among themselves, their voices rising. Krevix roared at them to maintain discipline, but even he looked uncertain now. 5 of his crew dead, the ship turning against them. An invisible enemy picking them off one by one. Diane leaned close to Captain Hyunwoo and whispered, "What's happening?" The captain shook his head slightly. "I don't know, but someone's fighting back." "Who?" Diane looked around at the crew. They were all here except Tae-sung, the cook. "Where's Tae-sung?" Before Hyunwoo could answer, the lights in the cargo bay flickered. The raiders all turned, their weapons raised. For a moment, everything was still. Then a scream came from somewhere deep in the ship. It cut off suddenly, leaving only silence. One of the raiders, a young human barely out of his teens, started backing toward the airlock. "I'm out. This isn't worth it. Something's wrong with this ship. Stand your ground," Krevix bellowed. But even his voice had a hint of fear in it now. Another scream, closer this time. The raiders formed a defensive circle, their backs to each other, weapons pointing outward. The crew stayed on the floor, trying to make themselves small and invisible. Tae-sung watched it all from the ventilation shaft above the cargo bay. He could see everything through the grating. 8 raiders left in this room, maybe 6 more scattered through the ship. The odds were getting better, but he couldn't attack here. Not yet. Too many guns, too much open space. The raiders would use the crew as shields. He needed to thin their numbers more. Make them scared. Make them desperate. Fear made people stupid, and stupid people made mistakes. He crawled backward through the shaft, quiet as smoke, and disappeared into the darkness of the ship. The hunters had become the hunted, and they didn't even know the name of the thing stalking them through the shadows. They just knew they were dying. The ship had become a maze of darkness and death. Red emergency lights cast long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air recyclers hummed steadily, but to the raiders every sound became a threat. Every shadow held danger. 2 raiders moved through the medical bay, their rifles sweeping back and forth. They'd been ordered to find medical supplies and instead found bodies. One of their own was sprawled on the floor, his eyes still open in surprise. No wounds were visible. He'd been killed so quickly and quietly that he hadn't even had time to call for help. "This is crazy," one raider whispered. His name was Tog, a scarred veteran of a dozen raids. "We should just leave. Take our ships and go." His partner, a thin human woman named Sela, shook her head. "Krevix won't abandon the cargo. You know how he is." "Then Krevix is an idiot. We're being hunted by a ghost." "It's not a ghost. It's one person, has to be. One member of the crew who got away." Sela tried to sound confident, but her voice shook. "Just one person. One person who's killed 8 of us," Tog replied. "In less than an hour." They moved into the corridor, checking both directions. Empty. The ship felt too big now, too full of places to hide. They started toward the cargo bay where the rest of their group had gathered. Safety in numbers, they never made it. The lights in the corridor went out completely. Total darkness swallowed them. Tog fired his rifle blindly, the plasma bolts lighting up the hallway in brief flashes of blue light. He saw nothing, no target, no movement. "Sela?" he called out. No answer. "Sela!" His rifle light finally flickered on. The beam showed Sela lying on the floor, motionless. Tog spun around, his weapon pointing in every direction. "Show yourself," he screamed. "Fight me like a warrior, you coward." The lights came back on. The corridor was empty except for him and Sela's body. Tog backed toward the cargo bay, his rifle shaking in his hands. He kept his eyes on the corridor ahead, watching for any movement. He didn't see Tae-sung drop from the ceiling vent behind him. In the cargo bay, the remaining raiders had gathered into a tight defensive formation. There were only 10 of them left now, including Krevix. The reptilian leader's red scales seemed darker in the emergency lighting. His confidence was cracking. "This was supposed to be easy," one raider muttered. "Just a cargo ship. No weapons. No security." "Shut up," Krevix snapped. But he was thinking the same thing. Something had gone terribly wrong. Someone on this ship was a trained killer. Military, maybe. Special forces. The kind of human that gave even experienced raiders nightmares. Captain Hyunwoo watched the raiders from his position on the floor. He could see their fear growing. Could see them glancing at the doors and shadows like trapped animals. Someone was systematically destroying them. Someone who knew this ship better than they did. Someone who knew how to kill. His eyes found Daun. The first officer was thinking the same thing he was. They both knew who was missing. The quiet cook who never talked about his past, who kept to himself, who moved with a grace that seemed wrong for someone who just prepared food. "It's Tae-sung," Daun whispered. It has to be, Hyunwoo nodded slowly. I think you're right. But who is he really? Bo-ra, sitting nearby with dried blood on her face, heard them. I don't care who he is. I hope he kills every last one of these monsters. A loud clang echoed through the ship. The raiders all jumped, weapons pointing at the sound. It came from the ventilation system above them. Then another clang farther away. Then another. Something was moving through the vents, banging deliberately on the metal as it went. It's just trying to scare us, Krevik said, but his voice wasn't as strong as before. It's working, a raider whispered. Tae-sung was in the control junction again, watching multiple monitor feeds. He could see the cargo bay on one screen. See the scattered raiders searching the ship on others. See the fear in their movements. Good. Fear made people react instead of think, react instead of plan. He activated the ship's intercom system. His voice, calm and cold, filled every corridor. You came to my ship. You hurt my crew. Now you're going to die here. The effect was immediate. In the cargo bay, raiders spun around looking for speakers. Krevix roared in anger and confusion. Throughout the ship, the remaining raiders searching in pairs pressed their backs together, terrified. Who are you? Krevix shouted at the ceiling. Show yourself and fight. Taesung's response was simple. I'm just the cook. Then the intercom went silent. But the damage was done. The raiders now knew they weren't fighting a ghost or a monster. They were fighting one of the crew. One person, and that person was winning. Find him, Krevix ordered. Search every room. He can't hide forever, but Taesung wasn't hiding. He was hunting. He moved through the ship with terrible efficiency, using every advantage he had. He knew where the raiders were from the monitor feeds. He knew the ship's layout perfectly. He knew how to move without sound. And most importantly, he knew how to kill quickly. 2 raiders searching the crew quarters died without making a sound. Taesung left their bodies in the sleeping pods and moved on. 3 raiders guarding the airlocks to the raider ships died next. He needed to cut off their escape. Lock them in with him. After securing the airlocks, Taesung used the control console to seal the airlock doors and change their access codes. The raiders' ships were now unreachable. No escape, no reinforcements. They were trapped. In the cargo bay, Krevix received the reports. More raiders dead. The airlock sealed. His ships inaccessible. His crew was down to 6, including himself. 6 out of 20, and they still hadn't even seen their attacker. We're leaving, one raider announced, dropping his weapon. I don't care what you say, Krevix. I'm not dying here. Pick up your weapon, Krevix growled. No, I'm going to one of our ships and I'm leaving. The raider started toward the airlock. I said pick up your weapon. Krevix raised his own rifle and shot the deserter in the back. The body fell and didn't move. Krevix looked at his remaining crew. Anyone else want to run? The 5 raiders shook their heads. They were more afraid of Krevix than of the invisible killer. For now, Taesung watched this on the monitor. Krevix had just made a mistake. He'd shown his crew that he'd kill them himself. That there was no loyalty, no honor, just fear and violence. That knowledge would be useful. The cook left the control junction and made his way toward the cargo bay. It was time to change tactics. Hiding and ambushing had worked well, but 5 armed raiders in an open space with hostages required a different approach. He needed to separate them, make them desperate enough to abandon their defensive position. He found what he needed in the environmental control system. The Bright Horizon was an old ship with old systems, including a fire suppression system that could be triggered manually. Taesung activated it in every section except the cargo bay. Throughout the ship, alarms blared and sprinklers activated, but these weren't water sprinklers. They released a chemical foam designed to suffocate fires. The foam was harmless to people, but thick and blinding. It filled corridors and rooms, making visibility nearly zero. The raiders in the cargo bay heard the alarms and felt the ship shake slightly as pumps activated. Krevix looked around nervously. What now? One of his raiders checked a wall panel. Fire suppression system is active. Every deck except this one. The ship thinks there's a fire. There's no fire, Krevix said. He's just trying to... The lights went out again. This time even the emergency lights died. The cargo bay was plunged into total darkness. The crew on the floor couldn't see anything. The raiders shouted and turned on their weapon lights, but the beams only showed panicked faces and empty air. Something flew through the darkness and hit the floor with a metallic sound. Grenade! Someone screamed. The raiders dove for cover. The crew pressed themselves flat against the floor. 3 seconds passed. 5 seconds. Nothing happened. Krevix's weapon light found the object. It wasn't a grenade. It was an empty food can from the galley. Just trying to scare us, Krevix said. But his voice shook now. Then the real attack came. Not with noise or flash, but with silence. One raider at the edge of the group simply stopped responding. His friends called his name. Their weapon lights found him on the ground, not moving. Stay together, Krevix ordered. Back to back. Watch every direction. But in the darkness, with weapon lights casting wild shadows, it was impossible to watch everything. Another raider fell. Then another. The survivors fired blindly into the darkness, their plasma bolts scorching the walls and ceiling. They hit nothing. Forget this. One of the last 2 raiders screamed. He ran for the exit, weapon forgotten. He made it 3 steps before he fell. Krevix was alone now. His weapon light swept back and forth across the cargo bay. He saw the crew huddled on the floor. Saw his dead raiders scattered around the room. Saw nothing else. Come out and face me, he roared. You coward! Fight me face to face. The lights came back on. Krevix blinked in the sudden brightness, his weapon still raised. Standing in the doorway was Taesung, just a man in a cook's apron, holding a rifle he'd taken from a dead raider. Blood spattered his clothes and face. His eyes were completely calm. You wanted to see me, Taesung said quietly. Here I am. Krevix stared at Taesung for a long moment. The massive reptilian was twice the size of the cook, covered in thick scales and battle scars. He carried a heavy plasma rifle and wore armor designed to stop most weapons. Taesung stood in the doorway in a blood-stained apron, holding a rifle he'd scavenged from the dead. They looked nothing alike. One was built for war. The other looked like he should be serving soup. But Krevix had seen enough combat to recognize a predator when he faced one. The calm in Taesung's eyes wasn't peace. It was the stillness that came after killing. The emptiness that followed violence. Krevix had seen that look before in the eyes of the most dangerous soldiers in the galaxy. You killed all of them, Krevix said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Taesung replied simply. 20 trained raiders, with weapons and armor. And you're just a cook. I used to be something else. Taesung's voice was flat, emotionless. A long time ago. Krevix's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. Let me guess. Special Forces. One of those human units that does the dirty work no one talks about. He shifted his grip on his weapon. I've killed soldiers like you before. Then you know how this ends, Taesung said. The crew watched from the floor, too afraid to move. Captain Hyunwoo wanted to shout a warning, to help somehow, but what could he do? Daeun's hand found his and squeezed tight. They could only watch and hope. Krevix moved first. Despite his size, he was fast. The plasma rifle came up and fired, but Taesung was already moving, diving to the side as the bolt scorched the air where he'd been standing. He rolled behind a cargo crate and fired back. His shot hit Krevix's armor and deflected harmlessly. Good armor, Taesung called out. Expensive. Taken from a colonial marine captain, Krevix replied. He fired again, the plasma bolt destroying the crate Taesung hid behind. I killed him with my bare hands. Broke his neck like a stick. Taesung was already at a different position. Impressive. Marines are tough. You talk too much for a soldier. Krevix fired 3 quick shots trying to pin Taesung down. I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm a cook. Taesung's voice came from yet another location. He was moving constantly, never staying in one spot. I just make food and stay quiet. You're a killer. Same as me. Krevix moved along the wall, trying to get an angle on Taesung. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Maybe you're right, Taesung admitted. His next shot wasn't aimed at Krevix. It hit a support cable holding a heavy cargo container suspended from the ceiling. The cable snapped and the container fell. Krevix barely rolled out of the way in time. The container crashed to the floor, blocking half the cargo bay. Krevix roared in anger and charged around the obstacle. But Taesung was gone. The raider leader spun around, searching. His weapon light found nothing. Then he heard a sound above him and looked up. Taesung dropped from an overhead beam, landing on Krevix's back. The rifle fell from the raider's hands as he tried to throw the cook off. But Taesung held on. One arm locked around Krevix's thick neck. The reptilian stumbled backward, trying to crush Taesung against the wall. The impact should have broken bones. Taesung grunted but held on tighter. Krevix reached back with his massive clawed hands, trying to grab him. One claw raked across Taesung's shoulder, tearing through fabric and skin. Blood flowed, but Taesung didn't let go. You can't choke me, Kravix gasped. My species. Different breathing system. I know, Taesung said calmly. His hand moved and there was a flash of metal. The combat knife he'd hidden in his apron plunged into a gap in Kravix's armor, right at the base of the skull. It was a precise strike, finding the exact spot where spine met brain. Kravix's body went rigid. Then it collapsed. Taesung rode it down to the floor and pulled his knife free. He stood slowly, breathing hard, blood dripping from his wounded shoulder. The cargo bay was silent except for the sound of his breathing. The crew remained frozen, staring at him. This man who had served them breakfast 8 hours ago. This quiet cook who never joined their conversations or their games. He stood among the bodies of 20 raiders covered in blood, holding weapons designed for war. Captain Hyun-woo was the first to move. He climbed slowly to his feet, his old knees shaking. Taesung? The cook looked at him. For a moment something flickered in his eyes. Fear maybe, or shame. Then it was gone, replaced by that same empty calm. Are you hurt, Captain? I'm fine. We're all fine thanks to you. Hyun-woo took a careful step forward. Who are you, really? Taesung was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down the rifle and the knife. My name is Taesung. That part is true. I'm 37 years old. I was born on New Seoul Colony. He took a breath. 15 years ago, I joined the Terra Defense Coalition. Special Operations Division. Shadow Unit, Daeun gasped. Even in the Outer Rim, people knew about Shadow Unit. They were the military's ghosts. The soldiers sent on missions that officially never happened. Assassinations, sabotage, rescue operations behind enemy lines. They were trained to be invisible, to survive alone behind enemy lines for months, to kill with anything or nothing. I served for 8 years, Taesung continued. His voice was flat, like he was reciting someone else's story. 43 missions, all classified, all successful. He looked down at his blood-stained hands. I was very good at my job. What happened? Subin asked quietly. The medical officer had stood up and was moving toward him with supplies to treat his wounds. The last mission went wrong. My whole team was killed. I was the only survivor. Taesung stood still as Subin began cleaning his shoulder wound. The mission was classified. The deaths were classified. Officially, my team never existed. We were erased. So you left, Hyun-woo said. I ran away, Taesung corrected. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be that person. Couldn't kill on command and pretend it was for the greater good. He looked at the captain with tired eyes. I wanted to be normal, to have a quiet life. So I learned to cook. I found this job. I thought I could forget. Bora stood up, wincing from her injuries. She walked over to Taesung and looked up at him. Then she hugged him. Thank you for saving us. Taesung stood rigid, uncomfortable with the touch. I'm sorry you had to see that. See me like that. Are you kidding? Bora stepped back, tears in her eyes. You saved our lives. All of us would be dead if not for you. Jin-ho, the young navigator, was crying. I thought we were going to die. I was so scared. But you fought for us. I killed for you, Taesung said quietly. It's not the same thing. It is to us, Hyun-woo said firmly. He walked over and put a hand on Taesung's good shoulder. You protected your crew. Your family. That's what matters. Taesung looked around at them all. Daeun was checking on the other crew members, making sure everyone was okay. Subin was finishing bandaging his wound. Bora was wiping her eyes. Jin-ho was trying to smile despite his tears. The others were gathering together, supporting each other. Family. He hadn't had one of those in a long time. His military unit had been the closest thing, and they were all dead. He'd spent 8 months on this ship, keeping everyone at arm's length, afraid to get close. Afraid they'd ask questions he couldn't answer. But they'd needed him. And he'd answered. He'd become the monster he'd tried to bury because his family was in danger. We need to secure the ship, Taesung said, falling back on military thinking. Check for any raiders I missed. Seal the damaged sections. Send a distress call to the nearest station. Already on it, Daeun replied. She was at a wall panel, her fingers moving across the controls. Station authority is responding. They're sending a patrol ship. Ida 6 hours, the raider ships, Taesung said. They're still attached to our airlocks. Valuable salvage. Hyun-woo nodded. We'll claim them as compensation for the attack. Should more than cover our repairs. He looked at Taesung carefully. The authorities will want statements. They'll run background checks on everyone. I know. Taesung's voice was resigned. My military records are sealed, but they exist. Someone with enough clearance could find them. He met the captain's eyes. I understand if you want me to leave. After they see who I really am. Stop, Hyunwoo interrupted. You're part of this crew. What you did before doesn't change that. What you did today proves it. He looked around at the others. Anyone disagree? The crew shook their heads. Bora spoke up first. You're one of us, Taesung. We're not letting you go. Besides, Doan added with a slight smile, who else can cook as well as you? Taesung felt something unfamiliar in his chest. A warmth he hadn't experienced in years. Acceptance, belonging. He'd spent so long running from his past, hiding from what he'd been. But maybe he didn't have to hide anymore. Not from these people. Thank you, he said quietly. All of you. Now come on, Subin said, pulling him toward the medical bay. That shoulder wound needs proper treatment. And you're probably running on adrenaline. When that wears off, you're going to crash hard. As they left the cargo bay, Taesung looked back one more time at the scene of the battle. Bodies and blood and broken equipment. The evidence of violence. Of the person he used to be. But also the evidence that he'd protected the people who mattered to him. Maybe he wasn't just a killer. Maybe he could be both. A cook who prepared meals and tended his garden. And when needed, a warrior who protected his family. Maybe he could finally stop running from himself. The patrol ship arrived exactly 6 hours later. It was a military vessel bristling with weapons and armor. Captain Hyunwoo had sent a detailed report of the attack, and the authorities were taking no chances. 20 raiders dead, 3 ships captured, and a crew of civilians who'd somehow survived what should have been a massacre. The military officers who boarded the Bright Horizon were professional and thorough. They documented everything, photographed every body, collected every weapon, interviewed every crew member. The lead investigator was a stern woman named Commander Park. She'd been in military service for 25 years and had seen her share of violence. But even she seemed impressed by what she found. 20 raiders from the Crimson Claws, she said, reviewing her datapad. One of the most dangerous pirate groups in the sector. They've destroyed 6 ships in the last year alone. Never left survivors. She looked at Captain Hyunwoo. And you're telling me one crew member killed all of them? That's correct, Hyunwoo replied calmly. This Taesung. Your cook, where is he now? In the medical bay, being treated for injuries sustained during the fight. Commander Park walked to the medical bay with 2 armed guards. She found Taesung sitting on an examination table while Subin finished bandaging his shoulder. He looked up as she entered, his face calm and unreadable. I'm Commander Park, Colonial Security Forces. I need to ask you some questions. Of course, Taesung said quietly. Park studied him carefully. He didn't look like much. Average height, lean build, plain face, the kind of person you'd pass on a station corridor and forget immediately. But his eyes were different. They had a depth that came from seeing too much, living through too much. Walk me through what happened. Start from when the raiders boarded. Taesung told the story simply and without emotion. He didn't exaggerate or try to make himself sound heroic. He just described what happened like he was reporting facts. The commander listened without interrupting, her expression growing more thoughtful. You killed 20 armed raiders with a knife and scavenged weapons, she said when he finished. That's not normal. That's elite military training. Taesung said nothing. I ran your background check. It came back mostly empty. Basic colonial birth records, some work history and food service, nothing remarkable. Park leaned forward. But there are gaps. Years where you don't appear anywhere in any system. That's unusual. That's the kind of gap that comes from classified military service. I don't know what you mean, Taesung said evenly. Yes, you do. I've been in the military long enough to recognize someone who's been through special operations training. The way you moved, the tactics you used, the precision of your kills. That's shadow unit methodology. The medical bay was silent. Subin had stopped working, her hands frozen on the bandage. Taesung met the commander's eyes and said nothing. Park sighed and put away her datapad. Here's the thing. Shadow Unit doesn't officially exist. Their records are sealed under about 6 different levels of security clearance. I don't have access to them and I don't want access to them. She stood up. As far as I'm concerned, you're just a cook who got very lucky and very brave when his ship was attacked. Your crew is alive because of you. That's all that matters. Thank you, Commander, Taesung said quietly. Don't thank me yet. The Crimson Claws will be angry when they learn what happened to their people. They might come looking for revenge. Park headed for the door, then paused. You might want to consider a different ship, somewhere safer. I'll think about it, Taesung said. After the commander left, Subin finished his bandaging in silence. When she was done, she sat down next to him. Are you going to leave? I don't know, Taesung admitted. Maybe it would be safer for everyone if I did. That's not for you to decide alone. We're a crew, a family. We decide together. 3 days later, the Bright Horizon was repaired and cleared to continue its journey. The raider ships had been claimed as salvage, their value more than enough to cover the damage and give each crew member a substantial bonus. The authorities had posted a notice about the attack, and word had spread through the stations. The crew of the Bright Horizon had survived the Crimson Claws. It made them famous in a small way. Taesung stood in his galley, preparing dinner like always. The routine was comforting. Chop vegetables, season the broth, stir the pot, simple, peaceful work. But his mind was troubled. Commander Park's words echoed in his head. The Crimson Claws might seek revenge. His presence put the crew in danger. Captain Hyunwoo entered the galley. Need any help? I'm fine, Captain. Hyunwoo pulled up a chair and sat down. You've been quiet, more than usual. Just thinking. About leaving? Taesung stopped stirring and looked at him. How did you know? Because I know you. You're thinking that you're a danger to us, that the raiders might come back, that we'd be safer without you. Hyunwoo smiled. You're wrong. Am I? Yes, what happened changed everything. We're not just a random cargo ship anymore. We're the ship that survived. The ship with a protector. That makes us valuable. Other ships will want to hire us for dangerous routes. We can charge premium rates. More importantly, pirates will think twice before attacking us. Taesung considered this. You want to use what happened as advertising? Not advertising, reputation, respect. Hyunwoo stood and walked to the counter. Besides, you're right. Raiders might come looking, and when they do, we'll need you here to protect us, not somewhere else. I'm not a soldier anymore. No, you're our cook, who happens to also be very good at keeping us alive. Hyunwoo put a hand on Taesung's good shoulder. Stay, please, we need you. Not just for your cooking. That evening, the crew gathered for dinner as usual. But this time things were different. They talked more, laughed more, included Taesung in their conversations. He was no longer the quiet cook they ignored. He was one of them. Family. Jin-ho, the young navigator, seemed especially interested in Taesung now. After dinner, he approached nervously. Can I ask you something? Of course. Would you teach me? How to fight, I mean. How to protect myself. Jin-ho looked down at his hands. When the raiders came, I was so scared. I couldn't do anything. I don't want to feel that helpless again. Taesung was quiet for a moment. Teaching meant sharing his knowledge, his skills, the things he'd tried to leave behind. But Jin-ho's request was honest and came from a good place. The desire to protect himself and others. All right, Taesung said finally, but we do it properly. Fighting isn't about violence. It's about discipline, control, understanding when to fight and when to run. I understand. We start tomorrow, 600 hours in the cargo bay. Wear comfortable clothes. Jin-ho's face lit up. Thank you, Taesung, really. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Jin-ho met Taesung every morning for training. It started with basic fitness and awareness. How to move efficiently, how to fall without injury, how to recognize danger before it became a threat. Bora joined them after a few days, then Subin. Soon half the crew was attending morning training sessions. Taesung taught them not how to kill, but how to survive. Basic self-defense. How to use their environment. How to work together as a team. He was patient and careful, never pushing too hard, always explaining why they practiced each movement. Daun watched the training sessions with interest. One day she approached Taesung after everyone else had left. You're good at this. Teaching, I mean. They're good students. It's more than that. You care about them. About keeping them safe. Daun crossed her arms. You know, when you first joined the crew, I didn't like you much. You were too quiet, too distant. I thought you were hiding something. You were right. Yes, but I was also wrong. What you were hiding wasn't shameful. It was painful. She looked at him directly. You lost your team, your friends, and you blamed yourself. Taesung's jaw tightened. I was the only survivor. I should have saved them. Or you survived because you were the strongest, the best trained. And they'd want you to keep living, to find something worth living for. Daun smiled slightly. I think you found it here. Taesung didn't respond, but something in his expression softened. 2 months after the attack, the Bright Horizon received an unusual contract. A colony world needed medical supplies delivered through a dangerous sector known for pirate activity. Most ships refused the job. Captain Hyunwoo accepted it without hesitation. You sure about this? Daeun asked during the briefing. That sector has seen 3 attacks in the last month. That's why we're charging triple rate, Hyunwoo replied. And that's why we have an advantage other ships don't. He looked at Taesung. We have protection. Taesung nodded. I've been teaching the crew basic defense. We're better prepared than before. Plus, Bo-Ra added with a grin, word has spread about what happened. Pirates know about us now. They might think twice. The journey through the dangerous sector was tense. Everyone stayed alert. Taesung had organized watch rotations and trained the crew on emergency procedures. They weren't helpless civilians anymore. They were a team. No pirates attacked. They reached the colony safely and delivered the supplies. The grateful colonists paid the full amount plus a bonus. As the Bright Horizon left orbit, the crew celebrated their success. That night, Taesung was in his galley preparing a special meal. Captain Hyunwoo found him there as usual. The captain watched him work for